Have you ever made a plan for your life only to feel like everything suddenly changes and you can't understand why? We've all been there, right? You set clear goals, work hard, and map out your future with great anticipation. You think you'll have it all figured out, but then out of nowhere something unexpected happens. A job falls through, a relationship ends, or life just doesn't go according to the way you envisioned it. And in those moments, it's hard to make sense of it all. You're left wondering, why did this happen? Why didn't things go as I planned? Maybe you're currently in that situation feeling confused, frustrated, or even a bit lost. You're questioning everything, wondering if the path you're on is the right one. And sometimes it feels like things are falling apart with no clear reason behind it. But here's the truth that many of us overlook: God can change your plans at any time. And that's not something to fear, but something to embrace. In today's video, we're going to explore an important aspect of spiritual life: how and why God might change the plans we make for ourselves and why that matters more than we think. It's easy to get caught up in our own ideas of success, thinking that we are the ones in control. But the reality is, we are not alone in this journey. God is constantly at work in our lives, guiding us in ways that we might not even fully understand. The truth is, while we might feel like we have control over every detail of our lives, God is the ultimate author of our stories. He knows us better than we know ourselves, and sometimes He changes our course in ways that are far beyond our comprehension. And when we look back, we often realize that the changes, though difficult at first, led us to something greater than we could have imagined on our own. So you might be asking, why does God change our plans? What's the purpose behind those unexpected shifts? That's exactly what we're going to dive into today. Why do we experience sudden changes, and what can we learn from them? Is it possible that those unexpected moments are actually part of a bigger, more beautiful plan that we just can't see yet? Can we trust that God's adjustments to our lives are for our ultimate good? This brings us to an important question. How do we handle those changes? When life seems to be turned upside down, it's natural to feel unsure and to question whether we're on the right path. But as we explore this topic, I want you to think about the possibility that the very changes you're facing right now could be leading you to something far more significant than your original plans ever could. Are you feeling uncertain about a recent change in your life? Maybe it's a career shift, a personal loss, or a decision that's shaking up your entire world. Whatever it is, don't worry. Together we're going to explore why God might alter your plans and what you can learn from that. Change is uncomfortable, but sometimes it's through that discomfort that God shapes us into who we were always meant to be. I encourage you to keep an open heart throughout this discussion, because you might just walk away with a new perspective on the changes you've been struggling with. The truth is, the plans God has for us are always better than what we could imagine for ourselves. If this message resonates with you, and you feel it could be a comfort to someone else, don't forget to like and share this video. Let's spread some encouragement and hope to those who may need it most. And if you want more insightful spiritual lessons like this, make sure you subscribe to my channel so you can continue to walk this journey with me. I'm excited to explore these truths with you. Let's get started. We often hear that life is about making choices, deciding where to go, what career to pursue, whom to marry, and how we want to live. We set out with plans, believing that the path we choose is the best one for us. We think this is the right decision for my life. I know what's best for me. But here's a crucial question. Do we truly understand the plan that God has for us? You see, the plans we make are based on our limited perspective. We see only part of the picture, our current circumstances, desires, and aspirations. But the divine plan that God has for each of us is far greater and deeper than what we can grasp in our own minds. While we can certainly make plans, God's plan often unfolds in ways that challenge us, change our direction, and lead us toward a purpose much bigger than what we could ever imagine. The truth is, each of us has a divine calling, a purpose that was designed long before we even came into existence. God, in His infinite wisdom, has a bigger, more beautiful plan for our lives than we can ever hope to create for ourselves. His plan is not just about our success, happiness, or comfort, It's about moulding us into who we are meant to be for a higher calling that goes beyond our own desires and ambitions. Let's take a deeper look at this divine plan, how it works, why it's different from our own plans, and how we can learn to trust in it. It's only natural for us to want to make plans. From a young age, we are taught to think ahead, to set goals, and to work hard to achieve them. We're encouraged to be ambitious, to pursue dreams, and to chart our own course in life. The concept of free will is deeply embedded in our worldview. We like to feel that we are in control of our lives. We take steps to plan for the future, believing that if we work hard enough, we can secure the life we want. We look at our goals, whether it's the career we want to pursue, the relationships we want to cultivate, or the success we want to avoid, and think, this is the right plan for me. This is what I need to be fulfilled. We tend to believe that our plan is perfect because it is based on our knowledge and experiences. After all, who else would know what's best for us except ourselves? But the truth is, we don't always know the full story. Our understanding is limited by our human nature. We can't see the future, nor can we predict every twist and turn of life. Despite our best efforts to plan life, has a way of surprising us sometimes in ways that don't seem to make sense at the time. That's where God's divine plan comes in. God sees the whole picture while we only see a small part of it. He understands our deepest needs, our struggles and our potential. His plan for us is rooted in His perfect wisdom, and it is always for our good, even when we can't immediately see how. To understand the divine nature of God's plans more clearly, let's take a look at a powerful story from the Bible, the story of Abraham. Abraham, originally named Abram, was a man who had a clear plan for his life. He was living with his family in the land of Ur, content with his life, and working to secure his future. But God had other plans for him, plans that would not only change Abraham's life, but would change the course of history. In Genesis 12:1-3, God called Abraham to leave his homeland and go to a land that God would show him. God promised to make him the father of a great nation and to bless him abundantly. At the time, Abraham was 75 years old and he had no children. His life as he knew it was set, yet God called him to step out in faith, to leave everything behind and follow a path he didn't fully understand. God's plan for Abraham was not just about giving him a child, which in itself was a miracle since Abraham and his wife Sarah were beyond childbearing age. God's plan was about creating a covenant that would bless all nations through Abraham's descendants. Abraham couldn't have known that his obedience would result in the formation of the nation of Israel, the birth of the Messiah, and the fulfillment of God's grand design for the salvation of humanity. All Abraham knew was that he had to trust God even when the plan didn't make sense at first. Abraham's story is an example of faith in action. He had to step into the unknown, not knowing exactly where he was going or how things would unfold. His initial obedience wasn't easy. He faced many challenges along the way, from famine to family struggles. Yet through it all, he trusted in God's plan, even when it didn't align with his own desires or expectations. In Genesis 15:6, the Bible tells us that Abram believed the Lord and he credited it to him as righteousness. Abraham's trust in God, despite not understanding the full scope of God's plan, was what allowed him to be a key figure in God's divine purpose for the world. Abraham's story teaches us an essential truth: we may not always understand God's plan, but we must trust that He knows what is best for us. There will be times when we question God's timing, His methods, and the changes that seem to disrupt our carefully laid plans. But like Abraham, we are called to walk in faith, knowing that God has a purpose for everything. As humans, it's difficult to let go of control. We want to plan every detail, make every decision, and ensure that everything goes according to our desires. But here's the reality: God sees the end from the beginning. He knows the path we need to take, even if it means we have to walk through uncertainty, difficulty, or discomfort. When we face changes in our lives that feel jarring, it's important to remember that God always sees the bigger picture. We can't always understand His ways, but we can trust that His plans are designed with our ultimate good in mind. Jeremiah 29:11 reminds us of this truth. For I know the plans I have for you, declares the Lord, plans for welfare and not for evil, to give you a future and a hope. God's plan for us is always good, even when it involves hardships or detours. Sometimes the changes we experience are necessary for our growth, and they lead us to a place we wouldn't have arrived at on our own. Faith is at the core of trusting God's plan. Just as Abraham had to trust God without knowing all the details, we are called to do the same. Faith is the belief that God knows what is best for us even when we don't understand the circumstances. It's about surrendering our own plans and allowing God to guide us towards something greater. Proverbs 3:5-6 says, "Trust in the Lord with all your heart and lean not on your own understanding. In all your ways acknowledge him and he will make your paths straight." When we trust God, we acknowledge that his wisdom surpasses our own. We surrender our desire for control and allow him to lead us toward his perfect plan. It's not always easy. We may face uncertainty, disappointment, and even fear. But just as God guided Abraham step by step, he will guide us as well. The beauty of following God's plan is that it's not about achieving our own desires, it's about fulfilling the purpose he has designed for us. And in the process, we often discover a deeper sense of peace and fulfillment than we could have ever imagined on our own. As we reflect on the divine nature of God's plans, it's clear that his plan for our lives is far greater than anything we could ever devise on our own. Just like Abraham, we may not understand where the journey will lead, but we can trust that God's path for us is the best one. His plan is always filled with hope, purpose, and a future beyond our wildest dreams. The question is, are we willing to step out in faith, trusting that God knows the way, even when we can't see the end of the road? As we continue to navigate life's uncertainties, let's remember that God's plan is perfect. He sees the full picture, and he's leading us towards something far greater than we can imagine. Our role is to trust, to walk by faith, and to allow his divine plan to unfold in our lives. We all make plans. Whether it's the career we dream of, the family we want to build, or the life we envision, we often think we know exactly where we're headed. But what happens when life doesn't go according to plan? What happens when everything seems to change unexpectedly, leaving us feeling confused or even frustrated? Maybe your plan is good, but it's not the best. You might have spent years crafting the perfect idea of how your life should unfold, but sometimes God steps in and changes things in ways we don't understand. When that happens, it's not a mistake or a random occurrence, it's often part of God's greater plan. God may change your plan for a higher purpose, a more perfect plan. In this section, we're going to explore some of the reasons why God changes our plans. Understanding these reasons can help us accept life's unexpected twists and turns with greater faith and trust in God's wisdom. One of the most common reasons God changes our plans is to test our faith. In the Bible, we are told that faith is more precious than gold, 1 Peter 1:7. God often uses situations where our plans are disrupted to test how deeply we trust him. When our plans change unexpectedly, we are forced to make a decision. Will we trust in God's purpose even when it doesn't make sense? Will we continue to follow his lead even when the path seems uncertain or difficult? Faith is not just about trusting God when things are going well, it's about trusting him in the midst of challenges, detours, and times of uncertainty. Think about the story of Abraham and his son Isaac. God tested Abraham's faith by asking him to sacrifice his son Isaac, the promised child through whom God had promised to build a great nation. Genesis 22:1-18. Abraham's plan, the one he had cherished for years, was shattered in that moment. But Abraham didn't question God's plan. He trusted that God knew what he was doing even when it seemed incomprehensible. This story teaches us that God allows us to go through trials in order to strengthen our faith. When our plans are disrupted, we are given an opportunity to rely more fully on God. By testing our faith, he shapes us into stronger, more resilient people who learn to trust in him more deeply. Another reason God changes our plans is to lead us to better opportunities, ones that we may not have been able to recognize on our own. Sometimes we get so focused on our own plans that we miss the doors that God is opening for us. What seems like a setback or disappointment might actually be a redirection towards something greater. Consider the story of Joseph in the Bible. Joseph had dreams of greatness. He was a young man favored by his father Jacob, and he had visions of his brothers bowing down to him. But instead of the path to greatness being a straight line, Joseph's life took a series of unexpected turns. He was betrayed by his brothers, sold into slavery, and ended up in Egypt far from his family and everything he knew. At first, it seemed like Joseph's life was falling apart, but in hindsight we see that God used every detour and hardship to lead Joseph to a much greater purpose. Joseph's time in Egypt, his struggles in Potiphar's house, and his imprisonment were all steps that prepared him for the leadership role he would one day hold in Pharaoh's court. Joseph eventually became the second most powerful man in Egypt, and he was instrumental in saving not only Egypt, but also the surrounding nations from famine. If Joseph's brothers hadn't sold him into slavery, he would not have ended up in Egypt, where he was able to interpret Pharaoh's dreams and save the nation. In Joseph's case, what seemed like an unjust betrayal and a series of unfortunate events were actually part of God's plan to position him for a future role that would allow him to fulfill a greater purpose. God often changes our plans to lead us to opportunities we couldn't have seen coming. We may not understand the reasons for our setbacks, but we can trust that God has something better waiting for us on the other side. Sometimes God changes our plans to protect us from dangers we cannot see. We live in a world full of uncertainties, and we often can't predict the future. God, however, knows what lies ahead. His plan for our lives is designed not only to help us fulfill our purpose, but also to keep us safe from harm, even when we don't understand why things are happening the way they are. Take, for example, the story of Paul in the New Testament. In Acts 16:6-10, Paul and his companions were planning to preach the gospel in certain regions, but the Holy Spirit kept them from entering those areas. At first, it may have seemed frustrating to Paul and his team after all they had good intentions to spread the word of God. But in the end, God's redirection led them to Macedonia, where they were able to share the gospel and make a significant impact. We often don't realize it, but God may be steering us away from situations or opportunities that would have led to harm or unnecessary struggles. Sometimes what feels like a failure or a closed door is actually God's protection. He may be saving us from something that we cannot see, guiding us towards something better, even though it may not be immediately clear. Joseph's story in the Bible is a powerful example of how God changes our plans for a greater purpose. As mentioned earlier, Joseph was sold into slavery by his brothers, and his life took a dramatic turn for the worse. Yet each of these changes was part of God's divine plan to elevate Joseph to a position of influence and power. Joseph's journey was long and painful. He was unjustly imprisoned after being falsely accused of a crime, but even then God used that time to shape him. Through it all, Joseph never lost his faith in God, and eventually God opened the door for him to interpret Pharaoh's dreams, which led to his rise to power. Joseph's story demonstrates that God's plans often involve hardships and detours. Joseph's initial plans were shattered, but by the end of his journey, he understood that everything had happened for a reason. When he was finally reunited with his brothers during a time of famine, he said to them, "You intended to harm me, but God intended it for good to accomplish what is now being done, the saving of many lives." Genesis 50:20. Joseph realized that God had allowed his plans to be changed to fulfill a purpose greater than he could have imagined. What seemed like setbacks were actually part of God's larger plan to use him to save nations. When our plans change, it's natural to feel frustrated or disillusioned. We may feel like we've lost control or that our efforts have been in vain. But as we've seen from Joseph's story and from other biblical examples, God's plan is always greater than our own. When our plans are changed, it's not the end of the story. It's a sign that God is still working to bring about something better. Trusting in God's plan doesn't mean that everything will be easy or that we will understand every change, but it does mean that we can rest in the knowledge that God is always with us, leading us and guiding us toward His perfect will. Even when things don't go according to plan, we can trust that God is in control and that His plan is far greater than anything we could imagine. The reasons why God changes our plans can be difficult to understand, especially when those changes come at times of disappointment or hardship. But whether He is testing our faith, leading us to better opportunities, or protecting us from unseen dangers, God's plan is always perfect. Like Joseph, we may not see the big picture while we're in the midst of life's twists and turns, but as we trust in God's wisdom and timing, we can be confident that His plan will unfold in the best possible way for our lives. So the next time your plans change unexpectedly, remember, God is always working behind the scenes for your good and His glory. Trust Him, surrender your plans to Him, and know that He is leading you to something far greater than you could ever imagine. We've all been there. You've worked hard, set goals, and followed through with your plans, but suddenly things don't go the way you expect. Whether it's a career setback, a personal challenge, or a life situation that flips your world upside down when your plans change unexpectedly, it can be incredibly unsettling. What's the first thing you feel when your life isn't going according to plan? Is it frustration, confusion, fear, or perhaps a combination of all of them? When we're faced with the disappointment of plans falling apart, it's normal to feel disoriented. We might feel like we've lost control, or that everything we've worked for has crumbled. It's easy to be overwhelmed by emotions such as frustration when we don't get the outcome we anticipated, confusion when things don't make sense, or fear when we don't know what's going to happen next. But what if these unexpected changes are not the end of the road, but the beginning of something better? Let's explore some of the powerful lessons we can learn from dealing with changes in our plans and how to handle them with faith, patience, and trust in God. When life throws us a curveball, it's easy to fall into a spiral of negative emotions. For instance, frustration often arises when our expectations aren't met. We've spent so much time planning and we feel like all that hard work is going to waste when things don't go according to plan. There's a sense of injustice. Why didn't our efforts lead to success? Why didn't things turn out the way we thought they would? Along with frustration often comes confusion. We may ask ourselves, what went wrong? What did I miss? How did I end up here? This confusion can leave us feeling disoriented and uncertain about what to do next. We may start doubting our ability to make good decisions, which can cause us to question our future. It's easy to wonder if we're on the wrong path when things suddenly change. Finally, there's fear. Fear of the unknown, fear of failure, fear of the future. When our plans are disrupted, we often feel like the control we once had is slipping away. We worry about what lies ahead and whether we'll be able to get back on track. How will I recover from this? Will I ever get to where I want to go? All these emotions are perfectly natural, but they also serve as a reminder that we are human. In moments of change and uncertainty, we often realize just how much we rely on our own understanding and control. We rely on our plans to give us a sense of direction, and when those plans change, it can feel like the rug has been pulled out from under us. But here's the good news. These emotions don't have to control us. Instead of letting frustration, confusion, and fear dictate our actions, we can use them as opportunities to grow in faith and trust in God's plan. When we're able to step back from the emotional chaos, we can start to see that life's disruptions are often lessons in disguise. God uses these moments to teach us important truths about ourselves, our relationship with Him, and His bigger plan for our lives. One of the most significant lessons we can learn when our plans change is patience. We live in a world that encourages instant gratification. We want things to happen now, and we're conditioned to believe that if we work hard enough, we can control the timing of everything. But God's plan doesn't always work on our timetable. When our plans fall apart, it can feel like we're at a standstill. We don't know how things will work out or what comes next. And yet this is where God often calls us to trust Him and wait. In Psalm 27:14, David writes, "Wait for the Lord. Be strong and take heart and wait for the Lord." Waiting is hard. It requires us to set aside our desires for immediate results and trust that God's timing is always perfect. Learning patience means trusting that God knows what's best for us even when we don't see it. While we may want a quick solution, God often uses the waiting period to refine us, shape our character, and prepare us for what's to come. Instead of rushing ahead, we're invited to lean on God, trusting that He will reveal the next steps when the time is right. The second important lesson is accepting that change is an inevitable part of life. Change is not always easy, but it is necessary for growth. Every season of life brings new challenges, and it's easy to resist change because it makes us feel uncomfortable. But God often allows changes to occur so that we can move forward and experience the fullness of His plan for us. Change may feel like a disruption, but in reality it's a stepping stone towards something greater. If we resist change, we can miss out on the blessings and opportunities that come with it. Proverbs 3:5-6 tells us, "Trust in the Lord with all your heart and lean not on your own understanding. In all your ways submit to Him and He will make your paths straight." This verse reminds us that we don't have to understand everything. God calls us to trust in His wisdom even when life doesn't go as planned. Change might not always make sense, but we can trust that it's part of God's bigger plan. Instead of fighting against it, we can learn to accept it with peace, knowing that God is in control. Finally, when our plans change, we learn the importance of placing trust in God. One of the hardest things we face is the feeling of uncertainty. When we don't understand why things are happening, it's easy to fall into anxiety or fear. But true trust means surrendering our own understanding and placing our future in God's hands. The story of Joseph in the Bible is a great example of this. Joseph's life was filled with dramatic changes, including betrayal by his brothers, being sold into slavery, and being falsely imprisoned. Through all of these changes, Joseph never lost his trust in God. And in the end, he saw how God used all of these changes to bring about a greater purpose to save nations and to fulfill God's promise to him. When our plans are disrupted, we don't always get to see the bigger picture right away, but by trusting God, we acknowledge that He sees what we cannot. Even when we don't understand His ways, we can trust that He is good and that He will work everything out for our good in His time. So what do we do when life doesn't go according to plan? Here are some practical pieces of advice to help you handle life's unexpected changes. Don't rush to fix everything. When plans change, it's tempting to jump into problem-solving mode. But sometimes the best thing you can do is to take a step back, breathe, and give yourself time to process. Trust that God is working even when you can't see it. Seek God in prayer. When life changes unexpectedly, prayer is your anchor. Talk to God about your feelings, ask for wisdom, patience, and strength to handle the situation. Prayer helps you reconnect with God and reminds you that you don't have to go through this alone. Reflect on past challenges. Look back on times when life didn't go as planned in the past. How did God use those experiences for your good? Reflecting on past moments of difficulty can remind you that God has always been faithful even when things didn't make sense. Stay open to new possibilities. Instead of focusing on the things you've lost, try to see the opportunity in the change. God might be leading you to something better than you initially imagined. Remember that God will never leave you. Most importantly, remember this truth: God will never leave you alone in the changes. Deuteronomy 31:6 says, "Be strong and courageous. Do not be afraid or terrified because of them, for the Lord your God goes with you. He will never leave you nor forsake you." No matter what happens, God is with you every step of the way. Even when you can't see His plan, trust that God always has a better plan for you, even if it's not immediately clear. He's working behind the scenes, and when you trust Him, He will guide you to something even greater than you could have ever imagined. When your plans change, it's natural to feel frustrated, confused, or afraid. But instead of letting those emotions take over, embrace the lessons that come with change. Learn patience. Accept that change is a part of life and place your trust in God's perfect plan. No matter what happens, remember that God is always with you, working for your good. Trust in His timing and know that His plan will always be better than your own. As we've seen throughout today's discussion, God can change your plans at any time, but what's important is recognizing that each change brings with it a deeper purpose. It's easy to get caught up in the frustration, confusion, or even fear when our plans don't unfold as expected. But in these moments, we're given an opportunity to hold on to faith and trust that God's perfect plan is still unfolding, even if we don't see it right away. The key takeaway here is simple but profound. What matters is not our control over the future, but our willingness to trust God and allow His plan to take shape in our lives. We may not understand the immediate circumstances, but in time we will see that God's guidance always leads us to a place of greater purpose, fulfillment, and peace. Now, I want to encourage you to take a moment and reflect on your own life. Think about the changes you've experienced, whether big or small. Can you see the divine purpose in those changes? Have there been moments in your life when things didn't go according to plan, but later you realized it was part of a greater plan that God had in store for you? Sometimes it's hard to see the bigger picture in the midst of life's challenges, but as we reflect on the past, we can often see how God's hand has guided us even through the most unexpected detours. His plan is always perfect, even when we can't see it in the moment. If you're feeling uncertain or anxious about changes in your plans right now, remember you're not alone. You don't have to navigate this season of life by yourself. Let God guide you through every step. In times of change, He promises to be with us, leading us toward His greater purpose. Trust that He has your best interests at heart, even when things feel uncertain. I hope that today's message has brought you some comfort and clarity. Remember that change is a part of God's plan, and even in the midst of uncertainty, He is working all things together for your good. If this message has been helpful to you, please like and share this video so that others can also experience comfort and encouragement in their own lives. And if you want to continue exploring these spiritual lessons, be sure to subscribe to my channel. There's so much more to discover together as we continue to grow in faith and trust in God's perfect timing. Thank you for watching, and may God bless you as you walk through the changes in your life with faith and peace.